plenty to discuss on this one, JT. Titans shocked the Dolphins 28-27 in the biggest upset of the year. 14-point underdogs on the road where they've looked downright terrible all year long. 2 turnovers in the final 6 minutes, 2 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion in the final 3 minutes. Rookie quarterback Will Levis looks fantastic in prime time. The most Tennessee Titans game in a long time, in my opinion. That's what I think sums it up. So Titans. And I think Ben Solak, our buddy on Twitter, said it best. Dread it, run from it. Spoiler, Mike Vrabel arrives all the same. By the way, on Vrabel, before we dive in, there's a million ways we can talk about this today, and we're going to try to cover all of them. So bear with me if today's dialogue and at times monologue feels a little bit disjointed, but I have a lot of thoughts, and I think you'll find all of them fascinating or interesting. And again, JT, I need your help policing today's show as folks have thoughts or as you have thoughts on what we have to talk about today in the comment section or from your brain. Stop me, interject. I want this to be a dialogue and not just a monologue, but I have a lot to get through. So do me a favor and jump in when you need to jump in. On Vrabel, who I have caught a whole lot of crap in recent weeks for defending and objectively believing in, despite ups and downs in the past calendar year. Yeah, man, like that team you saw last night sure looks like one that has given up on their coach. Don't you think? Like, clearly his message is no longer getting through to them. You can tell they're not playing for their guy anymore. I mean, that's what I saw last night. Is that what you saw last night?
Exactly. Yeah, they had given up right when the whistle blows. The team just gives up, and they somehow stumble their way into a win.
A win against the AFC 1 seed. And this is a team we're talking about who, at this point, is functionally out of the playoff race. And yet, they go on the road, again, where they've looked terrible. Every reason in the world to lose that football game, and as we thought they would, lose pretty bad. I mean, you bet them in the best bet gauntlet. I backed you in that decision, and you and I, ultimately, we have the luxury of being so good in the best bet gauntlet this year that loss is one that we will take 10 times out of 10 because it makes this show and this week far more interesting for the rest of our discussion on this show. So happy to have lost that bet, all told. But they had no business winning that game. And they had no business playing as hard, as physical, as long into the game, even when the night was darkest before dawn there at the very end. They had no business finishing like that. And yet, they played to the final whistle all night long. And they were the more physical team all night long. And they were determined to play for their coach and embody the style of football that their coach preaches and teaches until the final whistle all night long. That's not a team that has been lost by its head coach. That's not a team that needs to consider a different direction in leadership because who they've got just isn't quite getting through to the fellas in the locker room anymore. It was always a silly narrative. And those of you that give me a hard time for not being a real analyst or not being a real reporter or not being objective in my job because I blindly defend, no, there's nothing blind about it, guys. And that's what I've been trying to tell you. My defense of Mike Vrabel is because I'm old enough to remember more than the last calendar year. I'm old enough to remember Mike Vrabel having been here as a head coach for over half a decade now. And there's a track record there that hasn't looked great in the immediate past, but there's more to it than that. And you got a vintage Mike Vrabel Tennessee Titans performance on Monday night, a team that had no business winning when everybody in the world, even the folks most inclined to think that they could pull out a win, they convinced everybody that they were going to get killed, and they end up winning the game outright. I think that's really all there is to say about Mike Vrabel and his command of this team and the way that they reflect their head coach. But beyond that little soapbox, let's jump off and talk about some of the insanity in this game, because for the second consecutive week, JT, we've had a Titans game that was thoroughly enjoyable to watch. One was a loss, one was a win. Both of them wildly entertaining. Both of them, you saw some things that you don't typically see in football games. In fact, both contained things you pretty much never see in football games. Again, like last week, we talked on the show about how if you're going to have to, it's our job to watch and analyze and talk 3 times a week about this team, at least, God, please, can we make it like, can we make the games drunk? Can we make them crazy and ridiculous and wild and stupid and intoxicating and not, Vikings beat the Raiders 3-0. Like that's what we're trying to avoid. And so far we're 2 for 2 in the past 2 weeks. So I'm a big fan of that. Just a couple of things that caught my eye on this one. First of all, it was so hilarious that all day long, JT, what was the narrative is, oh God, Monday night. Did you see who's playing on Monday Night Football tonight? Jeez Louise, man. These two, and there's 2 games and they're both good. One of them is a touchdown spread and one of them is 2 touchdown spread.
And it's not like they're staggered like they have in the past. It's like same start time, which I think people had a lot of questions if you're a fan of the Manning cast, how they were going to do that. I've heard that some horror stories from last night that the Manning cast was just a mess trying to do both games at the same time. And I can't blame them because first of all, it's hard to think of some narratives for each side when going into this game, although there are some to be found. However, like just having them start at the same time, it was also just kind of just the cherry on top of ridiculous.
Trying to do their own little like, what if we had 2 games and we did a red zone situation because they forced you to watch the picture-in-picture situation with both games for like. I don't know a soul that wasn't infuriated by that. I'm guessing they won't do that again because it was kind of a disaster. But besides that, it was hilarious that the narrative all day was for some reason we're getting 2 games. Neither of them look good at all. And then it turns out 2 massive underdogs make each game wildly compelling and then both end up winning outright, which I did the calculations, by the way. If there was anybody insane enough to place a 2-team money line parlay on those games last night, you would have turned $10. And I'm making sure I got my math right here, pulling back up my research. You would have turned $10 into nearly $870. If you had just money line parlayed both of those 2 teams last night. The Titans were like plus 650. The Giants were like plus 270, something like that. Yeah, you'd have made a lot of money. But the NFL rocks. Never forget that. These are the kind of nights that you look at and you're like, oh God, this can't. What are we doing here? That in March, you're going to be begging for, please give us football of any kind. I'm begging. I'm dying. I can't wait the next 4 months for real football. Please give us something. This is the kind of thing you need to savor. And this is why ultimately I push back often on folks that are like talking about the draft and end of November. Like, I get it. Your team might suck. You might be done with the year. Savor the football, man. Savor the football. But yeah, the grandkids, they're going to hear about the night that Tommy DeVito and Will Levis both pulled off upsets in the same night. That's a big deal. I guess we can start from the top. It took 0.3 seconds into the game for David Long Jr. to make an impact play, which I'm sitting there thinking, oh God, here we go. Like, this is going to be the narrative. We're going to have to talk about this. He's going to be a massive impact in the game. Kind of disappeared a little bit. I mean, he made some plays throughout the game, but he wasn't a big talking point. You're not hearing his name brought up on national radio much today. That's very good news. But it was funny that he makes that first tackle for loss, and you're like, hello, welcome back, David Long, former Titan, who's been balling out for the Miami Dolphins this year. The Titans playing early, JT, and we were discussing this via text. It appeared to be, let's just murder everybody, which felt a bit on the nose, frankly, but, effective. It's an effective strategy. Xavier Howard goes down very early in the first quarter. Then Jalen Waddle's nicked up. Then Tyreek Hill, who we'll talk about more later in the show, MVP Tyreek Hill. There was no better case for his MVP candidacy than that game last night, where when he was not on the field, the Dolphins offense couldn't do anything. Like, they couldn't really function well. And we're going to discuss that, but he gets nicked up and his ankle is still a big question mark going forward. And then Connor Williams, their center, which was the sneakiest of those 4, he goes down relatively early in the game, midway through the game, and he's torn his ACL. He's done for the year. That's a massive deal. He was playing very good ball. So didn't love that. You don't love when football players are constantly getting killed, but it was a nightmare game for the Dolphins' injury luck early on. In the first quarter, here's just some of the insane. Titans ended up winning this game, by the way. I'm going to remind you that because when I tell you the stat, you're going to be like, no, they didn't. No, they did. First quarter, the Titans were averaging 0.8 yards per play. Not great. The Dolphins were averaging a mere 8.1 yards per play. They escaped that first quarter somehow with the score. I think it was 7-0 at the end of the first. That was impressive in its own right. At that point in the game, we had people on Twitter, in my comments, in my DMs, already started rage tweeting to fire Vrabel, burn it down, burn it all down, when they were actually still hanging on with a very good football team on the road, but that's neither here nor there. And then Denico Autry blocked a field goal, which he's very good at. The last time the Titans did that was when he did it also last season. He's got doesn't he have 6 or 7 of those in his career or more? He's done that a lot. I know it was one of the stats that we had for one of our games earlier on in the year, but he's done that a ton in his career, and that was a big deal. Keeping points off the board was a little poetic feeling for the special teams unit to make a play like that right after Craig Ackerman was gone. And then you had Derrick Henry lining up as this was one of the strangest things we saw all night. Derrick Henry lining up as a wideout against Jalen Ramsey, making that leaping catch at the sticks for a first down. All right, 250 pounds, 6'2", big fella getting up. I mean, looking more athletic than I could. That was really, really impressive. It was a strange play, but it worked. So well done, I suppose. Who had this on their bingo cards, JT? The Dolphins in this game. Pretty good offense, I've been told. 3 passing plays of 20-plus yards for a total of 70 yards on the night. The Titans had 7 such explosive plays passing for 199 total yards. And the Dolphins offense, in case you're wondering, well, who are they playing against? Because it wasn't the Titans defense. No, it was. It was the Titans secondary. We're going to discuss that more later when we discuss the defense as a whole and their performance. But I mean, I was joking on Twitter yesterday before the game that I was sitting down playing GM, playing analyst GM or analyst DC rather, trying to figure out how I would hypothetically scheme up a game to eliminate Tyreek Hill from the equation without creating massive holes elsewhere. And I joked that I felt like the scientists in Apollo 13 where they're trying to fix the cabin air filter. And they're like, we need to make this a round air filter fit into a hole designed for this, a square air filter. And all we have is this, which is a table of duct tape and toothpicks. That's what that felt like. And yet the Titans scientists somehow found a way to devise a game plan to make the defense that at times throughout the game was clearly and obviously inferior in talent and in speed. And you see some angles that are taken and you're like, oh God, that hurts to watch. And yet they managed to be, one of, if not the number one defensive performances against the Dolphins all year long. The Dolphins offense functionally only scored 6 points in this game. Only generated 6 points in this game on their own. We're going to talk about that again in a little bit, but a really fantastic performance for the Titans defense. What else happened here? Some stats on what was a crazy and unexpected ending, right? And you've heard this thrown around a million times today. We're going to say it for the 1,000,001st time because it bears repeating. Teams down 14 or more points with 3 minutes left to play in the game have lost until last night 767 games in a row. 767. That's a lot of games in a row. Even further on than that, the Titans are the first NFL team ever, not since the merger, not since 2000, not in the last ever to be down 14 points with less than 2 minutes and 55 seconds left in regulation and win without having to go to overtime. According to Next Gen Stats, their win probability model, the Titans win probability was as low as 0.4%. 0.4% when they trailed the Dolphins 27-13 with 3:08 left in regulation. And that win goes down as the second most statistically improbable comeback in the Next Gen Stats era. It sure felt like the Titans needed they needed a miracle last night. That was a miraculous win. And to kind of tie in some news from the weekend before the Titans ended up playing this game and this news got a little bit overshadowed, it can't help, but I can't help at least, but thank, Frank Wycheck, who tragically passed away, I believe at age 52 this weekend, who played a pivotal role in the Music City Miracle. Sure felt poetic, sure felt meaningful that the Titans pull off such a miraculous end of game comeback and win on the game immediately following his passing. And that was really, really cool.